Good stuff. Welcome to OLC 40. This is class number 5. We are on unit 1, and I am Jillian Percy. All right, if we go to the bottom of this, these are the ways that you can easily reach us while I'm on the radio. You can call 1-800-465-7144. You can fax us work at 1-800-463-7852. I am on Facebook and YouTube as capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. And you can email me work or email me a question at jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. Okay. So just before we start, I wanted to acknowledge that I know the assignments are getting a little bit harder. And some of you may be thinking or feeling that you don't know how to do this. I kind of found this cute little meme about I do things I do not know how to do to learn how to do them. The first time you got on a bike, you probably didn't do it perfectly. You learned to ride by riding. It is the same thing with writing. You learn to become better writers by writing. A lot of times people dislike writing so much that they avoid it. And the only way really through that is just to keep on writing. And eventually you're going to find bit by bit that you get better and better. All right, I wanted to share this little video about growth mindset because I think it's really important for this particular course. Basically, somebody who has a growth mindset sees themselves as capable of improving and growing. Those people who have what's called a fixed mindset don't believe that they or other people can grow, change, or improve. So having a growth mindset is really helpful when tackling a new or difficult task, like this course, for example. So I saw this cool little video. Wanted to share this with you so you could see it. Oh, and have we got
Researcher and Professor Carol Dweck uses the term mindset to describe the way people think about.
Okay, researcher and Professor Carol Dweck uses the term mindset to describe the way people think about ability
and talent. Dweck delineates between two different mindsets that exist on a continuum. The first is the fixed mindset, which suggests that your abilities are innate and unchangeable. The second is a growth mindset, which views it as something you can improve through practice. In a fixed mindset, you view failure as permanent, but with a growth mindset, you see failure as a chance to learn and even pivot. Those with a fixed mindset are more likely to view critical feedback as a personal attack, while those with a growth mindset will see it as a chance to improve and develop where they can develop new systems. Pause it for a second there. So for example, if you get feedback saying, hey, you need to work on doing your writing longer sentences, or paying attention to the assignment topics. Some people will be like, oh, I made a mistake. That means I can't fix it. Other people will be like, oh, okay, she's mentioning specific things I need to fix. I'll just worry about those things. So keep on going here. The fixed mindset,
you're more likely to choose easier tasks and put in minimal effort.
After all, if talent is fixed,
why bother improving or even trying to improve?
Why even try? But
with the growth mindset, you're more likely to embrace
challenging
difficult tasks and work hard to improve.
Those with a fixed mindset
are likely to give up when they face an obstacle or have a failure.
Meanwhile, those with
growth mindset will view obstacles as a chance to experiment and to solve problems.
In a fixed mindset, the focus is on measurable accomplishments. But with the growth mindset, the focus is more on a journey of continual improvement. With a fixed mindset, you're less likely to take creative risks. But with a growth mindset, creative risks are simply a way to innovate and improve. Ultimately, your mindset influences everything. Creative risk-taking to how you feedback to whether or not you even finish tasks.
In the end, it is one of the greatest factors in determining whether or not you grow and improve
in your abilities.
All right, I'm going to pause there. So I'm sharing that because I think it's a really important part for this course. Believing that you can improve is what will make this course successful for you. Okay, so don't get discouraged if there's any kind of negative feedback or if there's any kind of problems with the assignment. Just keep on going, just keep on tweaking. I have absolute faith that people will be able to improve their writing over the course of this schedule. And if I didn't, there wouldn't be any point in teaching it, right? Everybody's learned by being taught at some point. All right, so we are going to review grammar. We want to have a better understanding of the jobs that words can do in a sentence to help us become better writers and readers. And it also gives our class a common vocabulary. So if I make comments about grammar in your writing, then you know what I'm referring to. But I know some people think, why does grammar even matter? It's boring, sometimes it's a little bit complicated. Well, basically, every language has rules that help us convey what we mean, but each language has slightly different rules. We often understand those rules instinctively when we speak, but we may have trouble putting those rules into words when we try to put our thoughts into writing. We learn to speak very early, we learn to write much later in life. But when we don't follow those innate rules, we may find that our writing doesn't sound quite right, or it may not even communicate what we were trying to communicate. So, for example, in English, we say, the boy bit the dog. If we said the dog bit the boy, if I say the boy bit the dog, it would mean something completely different. But why? What difference does it make? It's all the same words, right? Well, because in English, the rule is that the noun or the pronoun that comes before the verb is the subject and is the one doing the verb. So in the first sentence, the dog is doing the biting. But in the second sentence, the boy is doing the biting. But in some languages, the position of the noun wouldn't matter. The verb would have an indicator that tells you which word is the subject and is therefore the one doing the verb. That's just one reason why understanding how the rules of English work can help to make sure that what you are writing is really what you are trying to say. Okay, so I want to talk about adverbs. We've talked about a lot of the other parts of the speech already. Adverbs can describe or modify a verb, another adverb, or an adjective. So it can describe a verb. For example, he ran slowly. Ran is our verb. Slowly is the adverb describing ran. I'm going to grab a pencil here. So ran is our verb. Slowly is describing ran. We can also describe another adverb. So dangerously is our first adverb or our important adverb. And this one is modifying dangerously. It's saying it's being done very dangerously, extra dangerously. We can also describe an adjective. Without the adverb, this sentence would say, my teacher is happy, and happy would be describing the teacher. But now the adverb wants to describe happy, saying he's extremely happy, super happy. So adverbs can describe more than just verbs. Verbs are kind of the common one that we learn about in school, but they actually can modify some of the other words in a sentence too. So adverbs have multiple jobs. They can describe how something is done, when something is done, where something is done, how often it is done, and to what extent it is done. An adverb can stand alone and be like one word in a sentence, or it can be part of a group of words called an adverb phrase. Where do adverbs show up in a sentence? Because we just talked about how different places in a sentence have different jobs. So adverbs can occur just before a verb. So told is the verb in this sentence, and coldly is our adverb, and it's right before it, okay? Adverbs can also occur just after the verb. So ran is our verb, and quickly is the adverb describing ran. They can also be used at the beginning of a sentence, often set off with a comma, sorry, not a comma. Yesterday is our adverb, and it's describing wrecked, right? But it also kind of is describing the whole sentence. All of this sentence happened yesterday. It's really common with our time adverbs or our sequencing adverbs to come at the beginning of a sentence. All right, so got some adverb examples here that are just one adverb, and here that are like adverb phrases. So we have today, I went to my new school. The boy jumped quickly down from the ladder. So quickly is describing jumped. Today was describing what time he went. The robber carefully disabled. It's describing how he's disabling this thing. He's doing it very carefully. Adverb phrases. During the summer, I swam every day. So it's describing the swimming, but it's telling you over the whole length of the summer, that's when they were doing the swimming. I broke my leg last winter. So when did I do it? I broke it last winter. It's describing the verb still. On the weekend, I plan to go fishing. It's describing when that plan is going to happen. I work out every morning. Every morning is a phrase telling us when they're going to work out. As much as he could, Grandpa helped shovel the stairs. So this is describing how he's shoveling or to what extent he's shoveling as much as he can. That's our thing. So adverb phrases are really, really common, and they help make our writing seem much richer and more interesting and really more clear. Okay, so again, adverbs can tell us when, where, how, to what extent, and how often. So a lot of times with when, sometimes people think of when as being only a clock time, like at 5 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, but it can be more loose than that. It could be describing a time of day like morning or evening or lunchtime, or you can describe weeks like last week, next week, 3 weeks from now, or months, next month, last month, or January, February. You could also describe like years or seasons like last season or around Christmas. So there's lots of different ways to talk about time. If it's describing when something happens, then it's considered an adverb. Where is a funny one. Where can sometimes be an adverb, it can sometimes be a preposition, or it can be both. So some of these words are going to come up again tomorrow when we talk about prepositions, okay? Towards, there, inside, here, back, far, above. You get the idea. How are the ones we often talk about in school? These are kind of the most common ones, and they're the ones that usually have an ly at the end. All right, these are super common. These are just a small sample of them. There's so many in English. You can turn almost any adjective into an adverb by adding ly to it. To what extent? These ones are very limited. There's actually not a whole lot of these ones, but they are putting a limit on when an action is happening or how often. Well, how often is over here. To what extent it's happening. It's not happening. It's happening quite a bit. So very, to, quite, rather, somewhat, extremely, really, terribly, and very. How often? These are not all of them. These are just some examples. Sometimes, never, often, seldom, generally, occasionally, rarely, normally, frequently, and hardly ever. And just like we said, time ones really often come at the beginning of a sentence. I find the how often ones are really common at the beginning of a sentence too. It's a nice little transition into a sentence. Okay, so I wanted to go back over. Our big job right now is we're kind of talking about the writing process. We've done some work on pre-writing or brainstorming your ideas. Yesterday, we talked about drafting, using your pre-writing to create a rough draft. And today we're going to be talking about revising and editing, which are the next two steps in the writing process, okay? Today's assignment, we are going to be looking at assignment 13, which is the good copy of our news article. So please be aware, this assignment cannot be done if you have not yet completed assignment 12. If you have not completed assignment 12, please pause the video and review the lesson in class 4 in order to complete assignment 12. Today's lesson works from the assumption that you have a rough copy of your news article to work from. It is impossible to do today's assignment without that rough copy. Sometimes one lesson doesn't affect the other, but this one is 100% dependent on yesterday's lesson. So you have to do that one first before you tackle this, okay? All right, let's look at the assignment before we talk about how to do the assignment. Now, quick notice, this is worth 30 marks, guys. This is one of our bigger assignments. We want to do a good job with this one. It is time to produce a final draft copy of your news report. This is one of the required items for your portfolio. You've already started an end task. Way to go. Make a photocopy of the rough draft of your news report from lesson 3. Okay. So you've got your rough copy that you're going to hand in, and then you've got a second copy because we're going to mark this copy up. Okay. So you don't want this to be your only copy. This is an extra copy. Please, please, please check your spelling, your grammar, and your punctuation using the writing process as a guide. This copy of your rough draft should have all kinds of editing marks on it. Your revisions and editing should stand out clearly. And I'll show you what I mean in a bit of a second, but they talk here about putting a circle around a spelling mistake. This part is 10 marks. Just doing up that rough copy will be 10 marks. Assuming that you are satisfied with your revised and edited rough copy of your news report, you are to produce a final copy. This is your good one. It should look good. It should be neat. It should be error-free. Also remember to include your sketch or your other graphic that you looked for in assignment 12. Make sure you re-include it with your final copy, okay? Refer to the checklist we talked about earlier to make sure everything is in order, and I'll show you that in a second, okay? Just want to point out, the rough draft of this news report was worth 27 marks. This good copy is worth 30 marks. So these two assignments together are worth 57 marks. So please take your time with this assignment. It is a big one. It has a big influence on your marks. All right, here is a review of what they wanted in the news report. As you're making your revisions, you want to make sure you didn't forget one of these. Make sure there's a headline. It should be short, snappy, catch the reader's attention. A date should be included in the report. Remember, people want to know when things are happening. An appropriate who. You should be able to tell who the story is about. Make sure you tell us what, when, where, and why. It should be correct and it should make sense. The how demonstrates understanding of the event. The quotes are thoughtful and appropriate to the event. Remember that you may end up making these up. They could be from the first chapter, but it's possible you just made them up, and that's fine, as long as they make sense, okay? The level of detail demonstrates considerable understanding of the event. If at any point you're doing the checklist and you're going, oh, I don't have that, it's time to stop and fix that. We want all of these to be yeses, okay? So you've already probably got a topic. It has to be based on the chapter 1 of Jimmy Comes Home. The topic title can be Juvenile Offender Back in Town, or you can make up your own headline. You do have to make sure you've included either a picture or some sort of photograph, and you need to think about what details you've used. The rough draft must be 1 page in length. It's kind of one of the last things they mentioned, and for some reason they put it on a second page, so I was worried you guys might miss that. This is really, really important. You need that page, like that whole page, for this to be considered a good job. So if you only hand me in half a page, you've automatically halved your mark into 10 marks, right? Because you haven't given me enough to work with. So please, please, please make sure you've got 1 page and you're trying to follow the news story format. So the inverted pyramid structure, which is everything important is up top and it gets gradually less important as it goes down. And remember, the lead sentence, which would be like the first sentence or two, should answer all the 5 W's. If yours doesn't, you need to go back and rework that sentence until it does. Okay, very important. These 2 steps are not the same activity. Sometimes students get confused by this and it causes them to get lower marks. And I actually thought that the way they phrased it in the assignment kind of lends to that confusion because it acted like you would mostly be putting editing notes. And I think it's really important. Editing is not the next step. Revising is the next step. Revising is where you make significant changes to the rough copy. You might add more details to your sentences. You might be adding more sentences to your paragraphs. Maybe you need to move sentences around to make your meaning clearer, or maybe you have a whole bunch of stuff on one topic up at the beginning paragraph and you thought of one thing and added it at the bottom, but it really needs to be in that paragraph. Well, then you need to move it over. You may want to cross off sentences that are redundant. Sometimes we get repetitive because we're trying to make sure we have that length, and it ends up just being we're saying the same thing in different ways and it doesn't really need to be there. We may need to use more interesting words. We also may need to modify sentence structure so that our sentences don't all sound the same. That's one of the reasons we talked about adverbs and how to use adverbs at the beginning of sentence in the different places in a sentence. Editing is actually a much smaller job. It's pickier, right? For editing, you are looking at correcting any spelling mistakes, fixing any punctuation errors, checking for grammatical errors. If you do your assignments on the computer, a lot of times, a lot of word processing programs like Google Docs, and which you have because you are a student here, right? So you have a the Google Docs thing. It'll give you like little underlines, right? A little red underline shows you that there's some sort of spelling mistake. A little blue underline usually means there's a grammar problem or maybe there's a spacing problem. It is totally acceptable to use that program to help you make those corrections. You just want to make sure that you don't over rely on it. You still have to check it yourself. Okay. So looking next, here is my initial rough copy. I didn't do anything on Jimmy Comes Home because I was afraid people might feel like they wanted to copy me. I kind of made up an imaginary story. Okay. And as I was looking at things, I just wrote here, oh, it's not long enough. As I was looking at this, I was thinking this is definitely not a full page because I initially didn't notice that little part of the assignment where it said full page. So if I missed it, I figured you could miss it. That's why I pointed it out to you today. All right, I will read this for those of you who may be listening on the radio. Teens crash car recklessly. Josh and David drove themselves into a ditch. Both teens tested above the legal alcohol limit. Josh suffered major injuries. The driver, David, sustained minor injuries. A local resident, Doris Smith, said, I suddenly heard the most horrible sound of tires breaking and then the metal crashing. Another neighborhood resident added, there have been too many accidents around that corner. They should lower the speed limit. The police confirmed there have been at least 12 accidents on that street. So this is my rough copy. I have not made any corrections to that. It has a lot of problems. It does not meet the assignment. I need to fix some things up. To be honest, I probably would need to fix this up before I even handed it in as a rough copy because it's a little bit too short and it wouldn't even get a very good mark on the rough copy because it needs to be about twice as long probably. Okay. Quickly talking about this. One thing to think about as we are revising is the sentence structure. It can be easy to fall into the habit of only writing in simple sentences. One way to avoid this is to reread your paragraph, specifically looking for ways to join sentences to create compound sentences, which we're going to talk about more in a second. You can also look for ways to add information or to join sentences by creating complex sentences. And I'm going to skip the video there because I think I need to get through some of this. We can always go back and grab it if I need to. All right, compound sentences use what's called coordinating conjunctions. And there's really only a few for compound sentences. We use for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Those are the main ones we're going to use. I'll give you some examples. I should probably just give you some examples right now. Okay, so simple sentences to compound sentences. Up top in the black, I give you the simple sentences, and then in the blue, we talk about the compound sentences. So the boy was scared. He did not want to get off the airplane. Those are both simple sentences. You can see here's our subject, here's our subject. We want to make a compound sentence, right? It sounds a little more sophisticated. The boy was scared and he did not want to get off the airplane. It's still the same two sentences. We just added the conjunction and. The girl was hungry. She didn't like to eat fish. Again, here's my subject. Here's my subject. We're just going to join them with the word but. The girl was hungry, but she didn't like to eat fish. He wanted to be friends. He gave John a ride to work. We're going to join them with the word so. He wanted to be friends, so he gave John a ride to work. This way is fine. I think this way actually gives you more information because it's explaining why he gave John a ride to work. So that is the other thing with compound sentences. It isn't just that it looks different or sounds a little bit different. Sometimes when we write a good compound sentence, it actually gives us more information. It's just better writing. She made some moose stew. Her gookum was coming for a visit. All right, so this one, we changed it with for. And for, just like so, is another one where we're explaining why something is happening. She made some moose stew for her gookum was coming for a visit. Okay, why is she making the stew? Because her gookum's coming. So I'm explaining what's happening. All right, heading back. Complex sentences. Complex sentences use what are called coordinating conjunctions. We did talk about this a little bit the other day. A complex sentence has one main clause that could be a sentence all by itself, and then what they call a subordinating clause that is like a sentence fragment. It could not be all by itself. And usually it's because it has one of these kind of words there in front of it that changes the meaning of the sentence, right? When you see these words, they kind of imply that more information is coming. So if you see these at the beginning of a short basic sentence, it's generally a sentence fragment. So examples for subordinating conjunctions are after, although, as if, because, before, even, how, if, since, supposing, though, unless, until, when, where, while, and whether. These are not all the subordinating conjunctions. There are a lot more. I didn't have room for all of them. These are probably the ones you're going to see most commonly, though. Okay, so here's an example of how to change a simple sentence into a compound sentence. He went to the store, he crashed the car. After he went to the store, he crashed the car. By adding that conjunction, I've suddenly explained to you the sequence of events. Oh, hang on. We don't want compound. These are complex. Bad me. Sorry. I apologize for that. Sometimes, this is why you have to edit a little carefully. Sometimes when I read what I thought I was writing, not what I actually wrote. All right. His license was suspended. He was drunk driving. His license was suspended because he was drunk driving. All right. This is our subordinating clause. This could stand all by itself. His license was suspended. But because he was drunk driving doesn't, because we're like, well, what happened because he was drunk driving, right? It's kind of demanding a reason. He was driving too fast. He had not been drunk. Okay. He was driving too fast, even if he had not been drunk. So again, I've added a lot more information just by using that conjunction. So, just by itself, no, he wasn't drunk. Oh, they're trying to explain the accident would have happened probably even if he hadn't been drunk because he's driving too fast. So it's giving you more information besides also just being a more sophisticated way to write. All right, so here is my rough copy. And I was trying to do what they were asking, but it does get a bit messy. So I did it slightly different. I put my rough copy here. I added a few marks. And then down here, I kind of showed you in blue and in red some of the changes I made. If I was doing this for the assignment, what I probably would do is take these lines, add a couple spaces, so I've got room to make the changes, okay? So here we've got teens crash car recklessly. That's my headline, so I did that. Here's my lead. Josh and David drove themselves into a ditch. That does not include the 5 W's. I have not told them enough for my lead. So right away, I know I've got to fix that lead. That's terrible. On Thursday evening around 11:10 p.m., so there's my when, two teens, Josh Douglas and David Steeples, there's my who, drove themselves into a ditch. That's what they did at the sharp curve on Pine Street. And that's where. Okay. Since the police have reported that both teens tested above the legal alcohol limit, they will be charged with driving under the influence. So this is why they're talking about it. It's really important. Okay. So my first two sentences now do cover it. Okay. You can see here now that it's a more normal font. This is way too short. I just didn't write enough. And I didn't even realize, like I said, I didn't notice the part where it said it needed to be a page. So I've noticed here, this should be quotation marks because the guy's talking there. So if someone's talking and I'm saying their exact words, I have to have a quotation marks there. And here I added a little bit of information. So I added a lot more. You can see in blue my changes, right? I tried to make sure you could see my changes. And I'm going to read a lot of these new changes, okay? On Thursday evening around 11:10 p.m., two teens, Josh Douglas and David Steeples, drove themselves into a ditch at the sharp curve on Pine Street. Since the police have reported that both teens tested above the legal alcohol limit, they will be charged with driving under the influence. David Steeples, aged 19, and driving at the time, sustained only minor injuries and was released from the hospital early Friday morning. Josh Douglas, aged 18, has sustained major injuries, and he is currently in ICU at Metropolitan Hospital. A local resident, Doris Smith, recalls, after I heard the most horrible sound of tires breaking and metal crashing, I ran outside. Then I called 911. Another resident, Peter Towers, added, there have been too many accidents around that corner. They should lower the speed limit. When questioned, the police confirmed that there have been at least 12 accidents on that street in the past 5 years. Many residents suggest that they will show up at the next town council meeting to demand that something be done. Okay, so I'm going to do, I had some problems with this earlier. I'm using a very big font. Let me just kind of go on it so I can show you. Hang on. Okay, so I'm using 22 to show you my writing, okay? But normally when you are doing writing on a computer, you would use a font of 12, okay? So I know there might be a temptation to use really big writing like I'm doing. I'm doing this to make sure you guys can see it because I know some of you are probably working off of your phone, okay? You need to make sure whatever font you're using that you've got it set at the size of 12. So my first thing here, I would want to check and see, is this a page? Because I got to say, I don't think it will be. I think I need to write a lot more on this. That'd be my first thing. So in terms of revising and editing, I still probably need to do some more revising. But you can see I've added a lot more information. I've tried to be more detailed. I added their last names. I added some times. I just tried to make it sound more interesting and more complex. Now, if I were to do some editing right now, there are still some problems, okay? So I'm going to change colors here to do editing. What can I use? I guess I'll use the green. Okay. Two teens, Josh Douglas and David Steeples. Okay. I would use a comma there because this is kind of set off from the other sentence. It's like a little phrase within a phrase. Two teens, and then I'm explaining who the two teens are, and then we're going back to the regular sentence. Okay, that's one editing item I would do. Pine Street. If it's named is street, then that should have a capital. This is okay. I'm not sure whether driving under influence would be in quotation marks because it's not really speech, but I did that because I wasn't sure how to show that it was a law. Okay. It's possible I could do that with doing a bold. I'm going to leave it for the moment. David Steeples, aged 19. Okay, there's another problem. That's another explanation. So I could set it off with a comma, or I could put the ages in a bracket. Okay, because it's not really part of the main sentence, but I've called these people teens, and normally you can't list the names of teens in a newspaper, right? So if I'm calling them teens, but then I'm saying their names, I'm adding the ages to show, yeah, they're legally adults. I can, in fact, add their names. Same thing down here. I could add a comma, right? Or I could put their ages in brackets, and either one is perfectly acceptable style-wise. David Steeples, age 19, and driving. I don't like the and there. I'm not joining David and driving. David is the subject, and here's his verb. And shouldn't be there. David Steeples, age 19. Maybe he was driving. That would make more sense, right? It's supposed to be a verb there, not a conjunction. And that's why we talk about grammar, so you know why I'm fixing things, okay? Was driving at the time. David Steeples, age 19, who was driving? Who was driving at the time, sustained only minor injuries, comma, and was released from the hospital early Friday morning. This is called the Oxford comma. It doesn't have to be there. I like it there. I think it makes sense in a long sentence. But here's the other problem. When I'm using the conjunction and, I should be doing two full sentences. So this one has a subject and my verb, but this one has no subject. So I need to make sure there is a subject and put it back in. He was released from the hospital early Friday morning. Josh Douglas, aged 18, has sustained major injuries, and he is currently in ICU at Metropolitan Hospital. Now this one's okay. I've got the and, but there's a subject and then the verb, and this has a subject and then a verb. So that one's fine. A local resident, Doris Smith. Now, a local resident, I think I would normally put a comma and a comma because I'm explaining who the local resident is, okay? It's not part of her name. The way I've got it written there, it looks like her name is local resident or something. Recalls, comma before a quotation mark. After I heard the most horrible sound of tires breaking and metal crashing, I ran outside. So I turned this into a complex sentence, and then I added some more information. Then I called 911. Another resident, Peter Towers, and look, I did this one correctly. I remembered to use my comma. Added, quotation marks, there have been too many accidents around that corner. They should lower the speed limit. Now, he's got two sentences in the quotation marks. That's fine. As long as he's talking, I am good to put the quotation marks around however many sentences he wants to say. When questioned, the police confirmed that there have been at least 12 accidents on that street in the past 5 years. So I've added some explanation of time. Many residents suggested that they will show up at the next town council meeting to demand something be done. Okay, so again, this is a little bit short, but I wanted to show you the process of doing revising first and then doing the nitpicky editing, okay? And some of that it is really nitpicky, okay? And we have not talked a whole lot about some of those very finicky grammar points. So don't worry if some of that was a bit obscure for you. You do the best you can with what you've got. I will be taking a look at people's assignments and then seeing what parts are confusing that we need to tackle, okay? So that is, I would then have to copy that all over and make it look good without any of those, all those changes. But I would hand that in, right? That's the first part of my good copy is that here's all my changes. And again, the reason for this is we're trying to make sure that it's your work and that you know how to make those changes, okay? Taking a look at the next item. Okay, this is the rubric or what we call the marking sheet for the news report. This is specifically what I will be looking for when I'm marking your news report. First, has it got the 5 W's in the how? That's a key part of any news report. It's absolutely crucial, okay? If you have all of them, then you're demonstrating a thorough knowledge. If you've only got one of them, then you may not even be hitting level 1. I would want to see at least 2 or so to be demonstrating a limited knowledge of the event, okay? Thinking an inquiry. There has to be a headline. There has to be a quote. I will be looking for those things. If you do not have those things, then I can't give you a mark, right? They have to be there to give you a mark. Communication. We're looking for full sentences, proper paragraphs, and grammar, okay? This is a kind of a bigger one. I will be looking for that. Application. Now here they're kind of repeating thing a little bit. They want to make sure that you've gone over the checklist: the headline, the date, the 5 W's, and the H, and the quote. They've transferred the skills successfully to the news report. It's a little bit of repetition. Not crazy about that, but I did not make this. Okay. This is showing all the assignments for lesson 3. Remember, lesson 3 isn't one day. Lesson 3 is kind of an entire concept. And the concept of lesson 3 was looking at how to write a news report. And I put the marks there so you can kind of see this is really, there's a lot of marks in this particular lesson. 10 marks for the assignment 10, which was about what people read. Assignment 11 was answering questions about a news report. That was worth 15 marks. Assignment 12 was writing a rough draft, which was worth 27 marks. And then today, writing down your final copy, which is worth 30 marks. So you can see here we've got, let's see, 5 and 7 is 12, and 1, 2, 3, 6, 8. Wow, 82 marks just for lesson 3. That's a lot of marks. These are much bigger assignments than for lesson 1 and 2. And I think, quite frankly, that they're a little tiny bit harder, okay? All right, summary of the assignments so far. There are a total of 18 assignments in Unit 1, and we are currently working on assignment 13. If you are following along on the radio Zoom classes, we are in Unit 1, Week 2, and we will probably still be working on Unit 1 next week as well. However, if you are working independently, which a lot of students are, then you're probably working at a little bit of a slower pace, but you should still be doing the assignments. You might want to try having all the Unit 1 assignments done by like the 1st or 2nd week of October. You don't want to keep putting things off and saying, well, I'll tackle it later, I'll tackle it later. Sometimes when we do that, the job just becomes too big and too overwhelming. It's better to just dive in, do the best you can, and hand some stuff in, okay? I also just want to reassure you that you have what it takes to complete this course. It will probably stretch your writing skills in a lot of different ways, but that is exactly how we grow. The really important thing is to tackle this course a little bit at a time so it doesn't get overwhelming. And either way, just take one assignment and you will do great. Hang on a sec. And I grabbed, hang on, this quote. I'm going to share a quick story before I do this. When I graduated from Teachers College, for months after I graduated, I had this recurring dream that I had forgotten one assignment, and that the university would notice, and suddenly they would take my license away. And what's that called? That's called imposter syndrome, right? It's where you feel like, oh, I don't really know enough to be doing the job. I'm kind of faking it a little bit. But you know, whenever you're trying something new, that's often what we're doing, okay? So imposter syndrome is where you're saying to yourself, I don't know what I'm doing, and it's only a matter of time until everybody finds out. Growth mindset, which we talked about at the beginning, says, I don't know what I'm doing yet, but it's only a matter of time until I figure it out. Okay. This one, we're both acknowledging, I don't know what I'm doing, but here, this yet, that yet means, but we're going to figure it out. Here, we're worrying about everybody else noticing our lack of knowledge, right? But here, we're looking at ourselves, right? And that's a huge difference. Imposter syndrome is about trying to keep up appearances for other people. And growth mindset is about trying to learn the skills so that you have the self-confidence, okay? So the highest form of self-confidence is believing in your ability to learn. And I just want to point out that you absolutely have that. I don't want to go on any farther there. Okay, so quickly revising, where are we at? Okay. So I want to make sure I've gone over this assignment. Okay. 30 marks, make a photocopy, go over and revise it first. This stuff is actually editing. The person that wrote this, which by the way was not me, that's editing. That's the minor stuff, okay? That is not the most important stuff. The most important stuff is the revising. And quickly, I'm going to show the revising. Where did I show it? Okay, this is revising. This is the bigger stuff, okay? This is where you're fundamentally making some changes to your rough copy to make it better. And it sounds like it's harder, but I actually find it's easier once you've got the rough copy. Going through and revising is much easier. It's much easier to fix a sentence that's bad than to just stare at the blank page and try to think of something to say, okay? Fundamentally, it's easier. Oh, hang on. So your copy of the rough draft should have all kind of editing marks on it, but also please your revisions. You should be adding sentences. You should be adding words. If I don't see those things, I am going to give you a poor mark for this part of the assignment, okay? Please, please, please to remember it has to be a page long. A page handwritten, fine, but normal handwriting side, right? We don't do the thing where we suddenly make our handwriting twice as big. If you're doing it on a computer, it should be, the font size should be font 12. That is the normal font that we do stuff in, okay? Assuming that you're satisfied after you've got all your crazy corrections. Let me see. These are my corrections. Nope, not yet. Oh, here's my quiz corrections. Okay. You are going to keep this and you are going to hand this in to me, right? Absolutely. But what you're also going to do is go back and make a pretty version, essentially, of that, right? Because I would never hand this in by itself. It's too hard to read. You are going to hand this one into me, so I can see all the changes you made and understand what you know how to do, okay? I did all the colors just so it was easy for me to show you things. Do not worry about doing fancy colors. That's just kind of my thing. So I knew what I was talking about. The blue is showing where I added words. The red is showing where I joined sentences, and the green is showing all my editing stuff. This needs to be handed in, and then your good copy needs to be handed in. I am really, really happy with the work that people have done so far. I do have people handing in assignments. I am so looking forward to seeing more people's assignments. If you have not yet got your marks back, please don't worry. This is definitely a learning process for me, all the tech. I will get those assignments marked and into the system. Thank you so much for showing up today. And remember, growth mindset. We are going to develop our self-confidence because you, I promise, are going to learn how to write more effectively, and you will be very proud of yourselves by the time you have finished all the assignments in this course. Thank you so much for showing up today, and I look forward to talking to everybody tomorrow on Wednesday.